I am sorry for my son's rudeness, Hywel told her. He should not make fun of the people who are our northern kin. Whose land you covet, to make a consolidated land, as Edward consolidates, as Constantine consolidates. A guard came when summoned by his king, and Hywel gave him a brief instruction, pointing down a passageway to the left. From Osrith's sketchy geography of the palace, she concluded it was in the same direction the men had taken Utid. They turned a corner, the guard, whose robe flashed red in the torchlight, striding on. Osrith paused, a pain in her stomach. She slowed. Stitch, she thought, and felt a cramping in the back of her thighs. Osrith rested a hand on one of the stone walls, drawing herself back to it when a figure, hooded, in a black cloak hurried past her. The hood slipped, and she realized she was looking at Finan, a terrified, but determined, look on his face. Osrith shrunk back, and Finan did not turn. He hadn't seen her, Osrith considered, and she slipped forward, onto the flagstones, to watch her lover turn left, and down the passage to where she had left Hywel. There were no other guards in the passageway, as she approached the door. Finan had already gone through the door to the right, where she and Hywel had talked, rattling the handle and thrusting the oak door back hard against the stone. Osrith crept closer. The door was not closed completely, but enough so that she could not make every word heard. And her heart began to feel as if it were breaking. Finan, on a knee before the king, was asking, no, begging Hywel for the knife, for ice spite, to save the life of the lord he loved most dear. Before his eyes, Hywel tempted Finan, holding it flat on his palms as he had done when he had received it from Pylig. A hand, and a soft word from the king, but Finan was not yet up, and it looked as if he were pleading again, and Osrith wanted to push open the door and help Finan up, cradle him in her arms. He looked that morose. Eventually, Hywel stepped to one side, and Finan slowly got to his feet, his head hanging low, and Osrith scuttled from the door like a scalded cat. She watched him stop as the door closed on the king, and place his hand on it, breathing deeply and hanging his head, and Osrith knew then that she would never be competition for her brother. Finan would never leave Utid to marry her, and now, Osrith promised herself, the agreement they had made was void. When Finan had made it down the passageway, Osrith turned to go, too, though to where, she did not know, for the guard had stridden down the corridor and away as Osrith had turned back. But she could ask, find a guard, or better yet, go out into the stables and find Angus and feel him. She could. You may come back in, Osrith. Hywel's voice called through the ajar door, and Osrith moved to it, and then stepped through. He was looking at the knife, and out of the window to the night-darkened sea, but when Osrith's boots scraped on the stone floor, he looked up. This is an evil blade, Hywel explained, and raised an arm. And the sea should have it. Shall I throw it now? Osrith felt her scream of, no. Before she even realized she was going to say it, and she caught the king's arm. Hywel lowered it, and looked at her, keeping his eyes fixed on Osrith until she let him go. No, Osrith heard herself saying in more conciliatory tones. Whatever you wish, Lord King, then do it. But there is a man in your palace who has need of it beforehand. She saw Hywel's eyes look upon her, on her face, down to her stomach and then back to the knife, and for a split second, Osrith thought he was going to plunge it into her. Instead, he let the weapon fall onto the floor. You want him to live? Hywel demanded. I want him to live, Osrith confirmed. There had been times she had wanted him to have died, fallen in battle, at the hand of an enemy within hazel branches. At her own hand. But that had gone, the feeling, like a wisp of cloud overhead. The dream of a brother called Utid, a life with him, over. She could feel no more resentment for him than she could grass for being green or the sky for leaking rain. What she could do was make sure that she kept him alive, for being dead absolved him of everything. It would also break Finan's heart to the point of it never, ever being mended again in his lifetime, and that would kill Osrith too. You are his sister, Hywel concluded, after a significant pause, and he nodded his head slowly backwards and forwards as if he had just worked something out. His reaction was genuine too, the first Osrith considered she had seen since they had arrived at Tidui. You beg the use of the knife for your brother? Was the letter from Constantine merely a cover for you to be here? Osrith shook her head. I did not know my brother was going to come here, Osrith said. I came in good faith for Constantine. And you want him to live? Osrith considered the question. I do not wish him to die, if his life can be saved. For Finan. Not Utad, not anyone. Though he does not believe in God, I do believe God believes in him. Hywel laughed at this. So, heathen, as all my priests have told me. Hywel nodded as if Osrith's news was no surprise. No more than the Lady Ethelfled has told me. So. He took a step to Osrith. What can you give me? If I allow the healer woman who is with Utad to borrow my prized possession? I have already lost it once. Your time, perhaps? In my company? Discussing our shared kinship? When Osrith nodded, and agreed with Hywel, she did not realize the implications of her agreement. Soon, she would. Very soon. Do you have an answer for Constantine? Osrith was keen to bring the subject round to her actual reason for being before him. Let me think on it, Osrith, he told her. And now, to show you your room. As Hywel left the woman with Eswi, at the guest chambers, he turned and, at the next corner crashed into Pyleague. The man seemed ill at ease about something, and he walked with Hywel back to the throne room. When I said I had brought you what you wanted, Lord King, Pyleague concluded by saying, the knife was not what I meant. And you are prepared to carry this out, Pyleague? Hywel asked. Eswi was sent away from us in ignominy, after your ... relationship. It is very difficult, I would imagine, to deceive. Yes, replied Pyleague, sharply, nodding his head when he realized the tone he had used to his king. Yes, I do. 88,888,888. Osrith awoke. A vigorous sea was crashing at a rock near the fortress's foundations, its waves rhythmic, soothing. So it was not the waters. Maybe, hunger. She thought to her stomach, and there was a growling. But it would wait until morning. No. Osrith listened. It was not Eswi, she knew his breathing snoring. It was tears. Forlorn tears of someone who was losing hope. Osrith's heart fluttered as she listened, and before she knew what she was doing her boots were on the stone floor and picking her way lightly across it. Her trail took her back to the hall, where no one was to be found, and Osrith's heart both rose and fell when she realized where the gentle sobbing was coming from. Retrieving the food she had wrapped behind a torch holding, she padded across the floor. Who is there? The woman in the hole demanded rather than asked, and added, I will kill anyone who touches me. Even a friend? Osrith asked, in Danish. There was a silence, which she felt in her bones. The woman was listening. I have no friends, Bryda told her, in Danish, and huffed in indignation when Osrith pulled the chain aside. How to get this off, she wondered. How to get down to the woman. Nor had I, when I found myself in Dunham, Osrith replied. The Welsh took you prisoner. After to Tenhulg. Obviously. Bryda's bitterness was palpable, but she was no longer crying. There is a door, a gate, into here. I cannot get to it. The lid, above me, where you are, needs 3 men to lift it. So, how do I get to the door? Osrith asked. I will try to free you, Bryda. But the conciliatory mood had changed and Bryda was defensive. Why are you in the castle of Hywel the bastard Welshman? She asked. That is a complicated question to answer, Osrith conceded. Look, I have food for you, I can get you water. How can I help you, as you once helped me? The way in is behind the steps. The voice was not Bryda's, but it was behind her. It was one Osrith knew so well. Allah! You made it. Osrith declared, as she turned round, to see the British woman, late of Winchester, standing with a dim torch. I hoped, I prayed you would. We did, nodded Allah. And now, it seems, God has brought us back together. She glanced at the lidded hole. I have been trying to help her, but she refuses. Most of the time. I do, put in Bryder. They are trying to poison me. She is a slave now, Allah said. A prisoner of war. Then, as it is your duty to keep her as a slave, it is Bryder's duty to try to escape. Osrith clutched the wrap of Laurent bread. It would give her a chance. But there was no promise she could accept from Bryder as part of any bargain, for she knew the woman would not keep. But, Osrith's eye was drawn to Allah's own, and the British woman was examining her stomach. It is wanted, Osrith told her. I am not the person you once knew. I am glad to hear it. Although, you are creeping about your host's fortress in the middle of the night planning to free his slave. His slave will have escaped by her own guile through a badly closed door in her cell, which leads to the cliffs, Bryder volunteered. When the tide is low, there is a precarious cliff path. When it is not, that is when the prisoner will drown, finished Allah. And the Welsh are the meant to be the custodians of Christianity in this land, Osrith told her. Nothing cruel, no torture. Souls to heavenly paradise. Yes, Allah nodded, and she noticed, in the glimmering torchlight, a cross about her neck, small, made of base metal, iron, perhaps. And Osrith scrolled back into her mind, and recalled what the British woman had said. She had said, God, not gods. Hywel? Allah asked. It is Lydok. The Danish woman attacked him and keeps her prisoner. They starve her, piss on her. She led the attack on many villagers from here to Offa's Dyke. I have tried to keep her alive, though she is not grateful. Lor, Osrith said to Allah, in Cymric. DWR. Line. Briog guys. Allah looked at her strangely, and Osrith realized she had slipped into Gaelish again. Shirt, trousers. Not for me, she added, and slipped Allah some silver. The woman looked at it, before pushing it back towards Osrith. I am Christian now, she told her. I do not need reward for a good deed done. But you must make it look as if Lydok did not close his own gate, and that the woman escaped by her own wit. Bryder, Osrith told Allah, and there was a shuffling below in the grimy pit, as Bryder shuffled in response to her own name. And she was gone. Osrith had to trust that, for the sake of freeing a prisoner, who was not hers to free, Allah was going to do what she asked. 88,888,888. The door was easy to find, behind a set of stone-hewn steps that felt as if they were the heart of the cliff. Creakings and grindings of rock tension and stress seemed much louder down here, and Osrith jumped as a groaning came from the rock to her right as she felt her way along a high but narrow passage. It was not a long one, and Osrith managed to reach the gate which Bryder had described, and pushed it open, for it was not locked. Bryder! Osrith called, flashing a torch she had taken from the hall. Bryder! I am here, Christian, she heard back. Osrith told her. Utad's sister, she scorned. And where would he be, I wonder? Cozy in his bed with a whore while I rot here? Osrith sighed. She knew the hatred, knew the loathing. It only served to damage herself. If she did manage to get Bryder free, could the woman not see a way to help her own self? When she got to the small, oval cell, Osrith gasped. The figure standing there did not look human, and gave off a ghastly smell, so much so that she wondered whether it was human. She was. And Bryder turned to Osrith, rage, bitterness, and sadness in her eyes. Osrith looked down, and saw something else. The woman was pregnant. How could a man claiming to be of God treat anyone so? Stand back, Osrith told her, looking above. There was enough height to the cell to wield buoy to give the force needed, and Osrith struck at the bolt on the cuff around her neck. Bryder gave a scream through her teeth, the energy huffing from her mouth as Osrith tried once more. And the metal fell to the floor. Bryder looked at it, and then back to Osrith. Thanks, she told Osrith. We are even, Osrith replied. And to answer your question, Utad is above, having suffered much agony, it would seem, from a blade called Ice Spite, that Canute stole once from Hywel. He seeks to use it to cure the evil that the blade caused in him. He did not look well, Osrith added, watching the woman's face crease into a grin. The passage leads into the hall. There is a woman I know who is bringing you food, bringing you clothing. But she would need something roomy, Osrith thought, and a vague memory pricked in her mind. Brida, the woman tormented by her barrenness, was with child. There is a hidden waterfall, Brida told her. Just down here. If you will allow me a few moments. And when she returned, Osrith realized that she must entirely trust her word, for Brida had shed all of her clothes, and was walking back to her completely naked, her stomach protruding as Osrith's did now, her nipples dark and full against dark areolas. I will take yours, if your woman has not brought me anything. Brida told her, and Osrith smiled. If she has brought you nothing, I agree, Osrith told her, and reached out to her own cloak tie and swung it over her shoulders. You are with child too, she murmured. Osrith nodded, hoping to end it there, but Brida reached to her neck. I recognize this. He is lost to me, Osrith replied, and to prevent any more talk on the subject, turned to the hard steps that would lead them to the feasting hall, above. The hall was deserted when Osrith and Brida ascended the stairs. Osrith repositioned the torch, and crossed to her parcel of bread and lard, and, sure enough, beside it, was a jar of ale and meat, and a folded shirt and trousers. And a sword. My sword, Brida told her. Surely, this woman owes you a great deal? Osrith shrugged as the woman ate hungrily. If she thinks so, she did not tell me so. She refused my silver, she is a Christian now. Brida laughed, almost choking on the bite of lamb. No Christian refuses silver. She glanced at Osrith's stomach again. I know this man, he spoke for you, at Dunham? A man of Utad. Osrith closed her eyes deliberately and then opened them. Finan. His name is Finan, Osrith confirmed. He returned with Utad from slavery, Brida recounted. They kept one another alive. And he is here, with Utad, to help him now. But to me, he is lost. How so? Brida lowered a bite of low-covered bread. He has chosen Utad. Perhaps he needs him, to give him a purpose. Utad is a strong leader. He is a coward. Brida scoffed. I begged him, pleaded with him to end my life rather than send me to slavery, and he turned from me. Did he do that to you too? Osrith shook her head, and narrowed her eyes. Nothing she could say would shock this woman. Utad gave me to Hywel for his pleasure and watched the man carry out his unnatural urges. Believe me, I would fight you for the position at the front of the queue to kill my brother, but I have long decided that, because you are a Christian, you will forgive him? And Osrith found herself laughing. You know that there was a plan, which did away with Ethelwold, and freed Ragnar's soul. I knew that, Osrith agreed. I barely imagine that man's hands on my body at all these days. And no. The Bible compels us to remember that vengeance is God's and he will repay, and it was hard to follow. Believe me, I have sought vengeance on my brother, but when I stopped. He has caused himself more pain by his own decisions than by anything I could ever have thought of. So, I remain with the Scots. The Scots? Brida, in the middle of another bite of meat, stopped, and looked at Osrith. As Utad's home was with Ragnar the Fearless, I escaped Bibbenberg as a child and ended up at Dunnottar, in Alba. That is my home. And the king, Constantine, who I care for most dear, is prepared to ally with my other brother, Wigger, to prevent Utad claiming the lands. I need do nothing, but watch, and pray that Utad fails. For he deserves to live his life without his birthright. Watch all he has connived for all these years come to naught. Then you have the right mind, Brida told her, and her hands moved to her stomach. I am blessed. And cursed. Canute. He was my daughter's father. And, as to Tenhulgendid, he admitted to Utad that he had orchestrated young Ragnar's death. Osrith sighed, as Brida added, he is lost to me, also. Yet, your child is innocent, as is mine. We can do what we can to bring them into this world as we would want them to be. They are like a blank piece of parchment waiting for their story to be written. Then Osrith paused. Daughter? I believe so. She has a strong will. What are you smiling for? Bryda asked Osrith, who had indeed broken into a grin. A healer, the healer Utad is with, told me I would have a girl. She said so, because I have been so dreadfully sick. A dull thud drew Osrith's attention and she turned to the passageway outside the hall. Then another. We must go, she cautioned Bryda. Where did you say the passage was? But Bryda was on her feet, the sword she had been left, though blunt, looking as if she was about to hit her with it. Then, she turned, and went towards the steps they had come up. Down here. Back there. She stopped when Osrith followed her. You need not come. The tide is out, I can make it. And go where? Ronvald. He has slaughtered many monks at a monastery further along the coast. His brother, Sigtryggr, is about to make an invasion, although from what I understand, Hywel has been paying the Norse to sail back and around Gwynedd, and attack Mercia down the Dee or the Merse. Be aware, he is no friend to Saxons. But I am half Cymric, Osrith told her. And it is on that basis that I was sent to speak with Hywel. A ferocious howl tore through the palace above them, followed by another. If people had been not awakened by Osrith and Bryda creeping around, they surely would be after that. Ice spite, Bryda told her. It takes and it gives. Canute gave it to Utad just as he confessed to Ragnar's killing. He needs to take it, and use it in his treatment, and, another low howl, like a huge sea creature in agony. Tack, Bryda said, as Osrith held open the gate that led out to pathway to the rock-hewn steps. The woman took it, and to freedom. 88,888,888. Of all the places, her brother had to be there, Osrith thought, as she crept across the feasting hall, Allah watching conspicuously in the shadows. She owed more than she could say to the British woman, for keeping her alive, for letting her help Bryda. This way, Allah said. Back to your chamber. And she opened a door that led to the kitchens, pointing to a passageway that Osrith remembered Hywel escorting her through. That meant his men too, she had seen them, or rather, some of them. Sifrik ... Osfith ... that meant dash. No, do not think of him, do not think of the man you love so dear in your heart, and a thought occurred to Osrith, as she stepped over the sleeping form of Eswi. Had Constantine known? Another low, agonized moan. I must go to help, Allah told her. The healer will need the help of another. And the woman, who must have been in her 60s now, took off down another passage with the sprightliness of a 20-year-old. But how could he have? How could Constantine know her brother was looking for the blade that had done damage to him at Tenhelg? That Pylig brought back to Hywel? Maybe Pylig needed a fast escort, maybe Constantine had a spy that kept tracks on Utad. She had to see him. She had to know he was there with her brother. It was clear the blade was being used to help Utad, and that Edith, ever the professional, had travelled with them to find it. The hospitaler rooms were beyond the kitchens and the light of the dim morning was reflecting off the low sea and into windows carved from the rock. Osrith could see little at first, except figures outlined by the sun's reflected brilliance. And then details came to her, the shape of bodies, the position of swords. I have underscore, she heard Allah say, then tried in Saxon, honey. With the thread of the underscore, spiders. Honey cobwebs, Osrith thought. The honey was sterile, and would keep any badness out, and the spider's threads were enough to give it density, to fill the void which Edith was draining over a bowl. Osrith turned. Medicine, bodily treatment, did not sit well with her constitution, and she waited, until moaning had subsided. A flash of light from the sea caused Osrith to look back and her heart flared with a bitter hopefulness. Finan was there, holding the hand of his lord. And what happened next, Osrith neither planned or intended to do. For, while an alarm had been raised to indicate a prisoner had escaped, long escaped, Osrith thought as she imagined Bryda herring over the ground, north, to get to her adopted kin. She headed back to her room, stepping over Eswi, as if she had been in her bed the whole night. When Eswi went to the call, Osrith got back to her feet and back to the hospitaler's rooms. Edith was outside, her body sighing deeply as she stared at Ice Spite, before handing it back to Hywel, who was outside the door, hand on the knob. She watched as the king of Deheubarth crossed to the window of the room beside Euthred and drew back his arm, throwing it with all his might into the dark sea. Then, he turned to a man standing next to him, who seemed from what Osrith could see, to be Edwin, the young man who had mocked her North Cymbric dialect. "No more," Hywel told his son. "Lydok has his fun, and their woman has escaped. No more. See to it that the horns are quieted. His actions were shameful, and I was not a good enough king, no, I was not a good enough Christian man to stop him earlier." Hywel put a hand on his son's back and escorted him into the passageway. Then, in the darkness, he spoke to Osrith. "You came to see whether your brother would live," he told her, and Osrith came out from her hiding place. "You came to see whether there was magic in that blade after all." Osrith said nothing. There was no point arguing against a pre-made interpretation of events. "You should rest," he told her. "I will come to you with my answer for Constantine," but, there was a new alert this time, no longer a low, rhythmical blowing of a horn, but an insistent trumpeting. He stepped away from her. "The Norse are coming," Hywel said, not to Osrith, but to the air around them. "And we must be ready. Edwin." He ran down the passageway after his sons. "Get Lydok. Rouse Rodri and Owain." There was more, in South Cymric which Osrith did not catch. Her heart sank. So, immediately she helped Brida, the woman turned round with an army of Norse to attack Tide. Why? Osrith closed her eyes for a moment and let her mind settle, like stones in a disturbed stream. No, she concluded. Brida could not have got to the Norse on foot so quickly and raised them. These had to be different Norse, using the Cymric trick of attacking at dawn. Euthred was going to live. His men would breathe easier. And Edith? The woman who had done all the hard work. She saw her, still outside the hospital room, her back to the wall, her breathing steadier now. And Osrith knew what she needed to do. Her eye was drawn to the door, beyond which her brother lay, recovering from his injuries. But she could not do it immediately. A hand caught Osrith's shoulder and Eswi brought her around to face him. "You are not to fight, Osrith," he insisted. He must have followed her, but he did not say anything to the point. If he heard Hywel, he could think that, Osrith reasoned. But the instruction overrode everything else and Osrith struggled under his grasp. "Please, be sensible now," Eswi cautioned her. "You do not lead men here like you did into Tenhulg. Please. Let us fight for you. Engus, feel him." There was a slight pause, before Eswi added, "Pylig." And, for once, Osrith listened. Not because she particularly wanted not to fight, but because there was something else she needed to do first.